Okay, so once again, good morning, entrepreneurs. So today we are here for the marketplace tender processing training, where we are going to be learning how to process tenders. Just like I said before, a lot of people, they do have a misconception about how to process tenders, and some other believe that you somehow need to be connected for you to be able to have tenders. So, which is why we are here. We are going to be learning from an expert who is our guest today, who will be hosted by none other than our apostle, Dr. SM Chirisa. So at this moment in time, I would like to introduce our guest. Kindly allow me to read his profile. He is going to be training us and teaching us the whole cycle of tendering. His name is Mr. Noel Manyere, and he is the founder and managing director of Tender Notice Board, which is Zimbabwe's leading procurement platform, which is transforming the way bidders source, track, and secure opportunities. With over a decade of experience in public sector procurement, Noel brings a unique blend of strategic and hands-on experience on the evolving procurement landscape. He is also a former procurement professional at one of Zimbabwe's largest parastatals. He also created a tech-driven infrastructure insurance solution in collaboration with CredSure Insurance Limited, a platform that brings innovation, risk management, and infrastructure development. Noel partners with companies, NGOs, and private sector players, guiding them to explore high-value tender opportunities while ensuring full compliance with beyond procurement standards, beyond consultancy. Noel is deeply committed to mentorship, empowering contractors and suppliers to craft competitive winning bids that open doors to growth and partnerships. Renowned for his practical interactive training sessions, he has become a vocal advocate for transparent procurement reforms that strengthen industry standards. He holds a Bachelor's of Accountancy honors degree, a Master's in Supply Chain Management, completing his visionary leadership and commitment to innovation in procurement and supply chain management. Ladies and gentlemen, at this moment in time, I'll kindly ask you to stand as we welcome Mr. Manyere. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, MC. That was a wonderful explanation. I didn't know I had all those qualifications, you know. Sometimes, in most cases, when we do these workshops, we do not have someone to explain where we are coming from, but it feels good, and I think we will actually start doing it very soon. Thank you so much, Mr. MC. My name is Noel Manyere, like what the MC has said. I'm the managing director of Tender Notice Board. I think a lot of you guys, if you've been in the tendering space, you might know us, Tender Notice Board, as an online procurement portal, and most of you guys might be registered on our portal. So before starting Tender Notice Board, I was with Zesa Holdings. So the bulk of my procurement time, I was with Zesa Holdings for about 7 years. And before joining Zesa Holdings, I was with Civil Aviation Authority of Zimbabwe. Oh, sorry, you can take your seats. Thank you. Sorry, I've already started. Thank you. I was with, so before Zesa Holdings, I was with Civil Aviation Authority of Zimbabwe. And before Civil Aviation, I was with Air Zimbabwe. So I think it's over 10 years now in public procurement. And I hope what we're going to share today is going to help you take your business to another level and also open up a market that you didn't think existed before. So, a lot of people have got a lot of misconceptions. So thank you so much, Doc, for this opportunity, and Mama, because it's very important for these misconceptions to be cleared so that people really understand that business opportunities are there out there, and it's just a matter of actually taking the right decision to start participating and taking up these business opportunities. Especially as Christians, it's very important for us to participate in tendering. You know, tendering as Christians is not just about business opportunities, but it's a divine assignment. It's a kingdom assignment because we have to influence the marketplace, you know. In the tendering space, that's where big economic decisions are made. So we have to take part so that we influence the tendering market. We influence the marketplace with integrity, transparency, honesty, and excellence. So I'm so happy to be here. My presentation is not yet there, but why is it important for us as Christians to take part in the tendering process, or as business companies, or as small companies or big companies? Why is it important for us to take part? If you participate in tenders, obviously, the most obvious reason is your sales are going to increase, isn't it? We are all looking for money. So if we participate in tenders, your sales are going to increase. And also, if you participate in tenders, the credibility of your company also improves. Just imagine if you are talking to a potential supplier in the private sector and you tell them that I'm the one who is doing the project at Parenyatwa, I'm the one who is doing the project, the road construction project that you see. It actually raises your credibility as a supplier. So you can never run away from tenders All right, thank you so much. So you can never run away from tenders if you want to reach greater heights with your business. It's something that you have to participate in, right? So I was saying that it raises credibility, and as a company, if you want to increase your sales, you know, I always tell people that the government is the biggest spender in any economy. That's the honest truth. There are some projects that can never be done by private companies because of the resources that are required by those to do those projects. So the government is the biggest spender in any economy. I think government expenditure is at around 25% of GDP currently. You know, 25 to 30% of GDP. So you can imagine, have you ever noticed that if the government fails to pay or delays payments, something happens to the market? You know, you start hearing people that Mara is kutendera, saying that Mara is kutendera, isn't it? It's because the government is not yet releasing funds. So if you are not part of that program, if you are not part of that end, the end where the government spends money, then you are losing out a great deal of potential business. All right? So we know that the government has got a lot of projects. I was talking to Apostle earlier on, and I was saying the cake is very, very big. There are a lot of business opportunities in the government, just the government alone. And for your own information, there are companies that only survives through government tenders. They don't deal with private companies. They only do tenders alone. And those companies are actually surviving. And not just surviving, they are living large, isn't it? So the government has got a lot of projects that they do. Obviously, the government has to provide good infrastructure. They have to provide health services. They have to provide education. And the government cannot just do all these things without the involvement of the private sector, right? So there has to be a law that governs the private sector and the government, right? So there is an act that is there that governs the relationship between the public sector and the private sector. And this act is called the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act. How many of us have heard about that act? Just a few. Okay. So this is the act that governs public procurement here in Zimbabwe. This is very important. Why? Because if that law was not there, then it would mean that only a few people would benefit from government expenditure. Yet, we all contribute to government expenditure through paying taxes, through paying, through duties. You know how government collects money from its citizens. So that those funds are not private funds, they are public funds. And when they are spent, those funds should be spent in a transparent manner. There should be fair treatment of bidders. When those funds are being spent. So you should also take part on the expenditure side. And how do you take part? You should understand the process. A lot of people complain to say, there is a lot of corruption, you won't win a tender if you don't know someone. Yes, there might be corruption, but the honest truth is the government of Zimbabwe has tried by all means to improve transparency in public procurement. And there are a lot of companies that are winning tenders without even knowing, a lot of them are winning tenders without even knowing anyone. Go on EGP, right? Right now, if you go on EGP, that's the platform that the government of Zimbabwe uses for public procurement. If you go on EGP, if you go under contract awards, you'll be surprised at the number of companies that are being awarded tenders and RFQ here in Zimbabwe. Some of them are small companies, So you don't need to know someone for you to win a tender. You need to know how to respond to that tender. I hope I'm making this clear. Right. So what do you need for you to be able to participate in government tenders? I think that's the first thing that we need to talk about. What do you need? All right. I think we can move to the next slide. The next one. All right, thank you. So what do we need? For you to be able to participate in government tenders. By the way, when we talk of tenders, we are not only referring to the government. Please take note. There are some other private companies that also do tenders, and there are a lot of NGOs that also do tenders. So the moment you master bid preparation, you have also mastered bid preparation for private companies, you have also mastered bid preparation for government, for NGOs as well. It's unfortunate, I think the NGO sector was affected a little bit because of the changes that actually happened in terms of funding. The United States reduced funding. I think it was one of the biggest donor in the NGO sector. So a lot of NGOs were affected. But nevertheless, a big number of NGOs are still operating. We've got UNDP, we've got World Hunger, and other NGOs that are actually sponsored maybe by religious organizations. So you need to participate in tenders on both government and also NGOs, right? The Bible says you should invest in 7 or 8 areas, for you do not know the destruction that will happen to that land. Have you ever heard that verse? It means that you should actually spread the risk, right? So if you're going to deal with the government, also deal with private companies, also deal with NGOs as well, so that you actually spread the risk. Okay, so what do you need? You need to be registered, first of all. There is a section in public procurement, section 28 of the act that I referred to, Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act. There is section 28 which talks about eligibility. What does the government look for when they want to see whether a company is eligible to participate in tenders? Section 28 says the company should be properly registered according to the Companies Act. That's the first thing. How do you demonstrate this? Obviously, they are going to look for your certificate of incorporation if you are a private limited company. They are going to look for your CRR6, CRR5. So the first thing is for you to register your company, right? Of course, there are some individual consultancy tenders where the government can actually deal with an individual person. That is if you have got a special skill. That cannot be, that does not require you to register a company. In that case, you might participate as an individual. But most of the tenders, the bulk of the tenders, you need to be registered. You need to be a registered company. Then you need to be tax compliant. Tendering is all about compliance. And the cost of not being compliant is higher than the cost of being compliant. I hope I'm making this clear. Most people are not compliant because they think that the government is taking a lot of money from them. But over the years, I have realized that you pay less if you are a compliant company or a compliant citizen than someone who tries to run away from taxes. So make sure that your paperwork is up to date, you are tax compliant. Number 3, you should be contributing to social security. Right? How do they determine that you're contributing to social security? You register at NASA and you get a NASA compliance certificate. Right? Number 3, you should be registered with PRAS. You should be registered with PRAS under the correct category. If you intend to do tenders, there's a supplier registration that PRAS does every year, and it's open up to the end of the year. So if you go on EGP, you can actually register and pick up the category that you want to respond to, and you'll be eligible. Then also, the directors of the company should not have been convicted of any criminal offense. I don't know if I still have a lot of friends at this moment. So the directors should not have been convicted of any criminal offense 5 years prior to the procurement activity. So you'll find out that most tenders now require you to submit what we call a litigation letter. Right? A litigation letter is a letter where you get that letter from your lawyer. You can just get it once and use it maybe for the next 2 years. It's fine. It doesn't mean that for every tender you have to apply for that letter. So you get the litigation letter. It says, to the best of our knowledge, company so and their directors have not been convicted of any criminal offense. And the company is in good standing, right? Okay. How many requirements have we spoken about right now? 5, isn't it? Okay. So there is another requirement that you might have come across when you were doing tenders, which is the vendor number. But the vendor number is not part of section 28. Take note of this section. Why is it important to take note of this section? Because when you get a tender document, they will always refer to section 28. So whenever you see them referring to section 28, now you know it's about eligibility, it's about all these documents that we were talking about, all these 5 documents that we were talking about. So there's another requirement, which is the vendor number. The government, we can actually divide the government into 2 parts for practical reasons, for learning purposes. There are what we call parastatals, right? And there is what we call the central government. The central government, we are looking at your ministries. We've got the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and a lot of other ministries. Those ministries, most of them do not generate their own income. So, because they do not generate their own income, when you work with them, when you participate on a tender under the ministry, you are paid through treasury. And for you to be paid through treasury, you should have been registered under Ministry of Finance, therefore having a what? A vendor number. So when you are doing a tender and they request a vendor number, it means that your money is going to come from the treasury. So when you're dealing with other parastatals like Net1, ZESA, NASA, those parastatals, they actually generate their own income. You might not be required to pay any, to be registered, to have a vendor number. So that's the difference, I think, for us, for it to be clear for us there. All right. So I think we can move. All right. So the main purpose of today's workshop is for us to understand the whole process, right? The public procurement process. But we had to start with the documents that are required so that at least you know what you need to work on after this workshop. So what happens, remember we said the principles of public procurement are transparency, honesty, and fair treatment of bidders. Remember, this money does not belong to an individual person, it belongs to all of us. So when they are buying, they should treat us fairly. How is the process done to make sure that there is transparency? One person once said, transparency in public procurement is like a solar eclipse. You know, when it happens, it happens, it doesn't happen often, and when it happens, people are amused, isn't it? But the honest truth is, it's now the order of the day. Transparency is now the order of the day. So, what's the process? I just want to give you a rough idea of how it's done. When a public organization wants to buy, first of all, they have to create what we call annual procurement plans, right? So they come up with an annual document that has got all the purchases that they are going to embark on for that year. This information is public information. If you go on EGP, under bulletin board, you actually see annual procurement plans there. As a citizen of Zimbabwe, you have got the right to inspect annual procurement plans for each and every organization. More so, as a supplier, it's to your best interest to go through annual procurement plans for government organizations so that you know, at least by the start of the year, you know the companies that you want to deal with, what they are going to buy, and when they are going to advertise those tenders. All that information is there. But the problem is, most people do not know that the information is available. So there are what we call annual procurement plans. These annual procurement plans are submitted to PRAS and they are authorized. When they are authorized, they are published on EGP, right? Let's say, well, you can go on EGP and get the information that we're talking about. Do you know that in the annual procurement plan, you're also told the source of funds, whether the money is coming from Treasury or it's coming from their own generation, income generation. So you know the risk factors that are involved, you know. I'm not saying Treasury does not pay. Please don't get me wrong. Eh? What I'm just saying is, at least you can assess, you know, and see which kind of tenders that you want to participate on. All right. So after that, let's say they want to build a road. They've identified a need. It's part of the annual procurement plan, which if it's part of the annual procurement plan, it means that it has been budgeted for. They then choose a procurement method. There are different procurement methods that are used in public procurement, right? We are going to talk about it very soon. We have got RFQs, what we call RFQs, request for quotations. These are small projects. So if you are a new company and maybe the requirements for a tender are too much for you, you do not have references, you're just starting, you've got little income, you can start with RFQs, small projects. And usually these projects are below 10,000 for supply of goods, below 5,000 for services, and below 20,000 for construction. We also have competitive bidding, which are the tenders that we are used to now. We've got domestic tenders and international tenders under competitive bidding, right? And we also have restricted bidding, and we have got direct procurement. I'll explain these methods very soon so that at least you understand. After choosing the procurement method to use, they then move to advertising the procurement in the newspapers. It's not always that you get tenders in the newspapers. If you are only looking for tenders in the newspapers, then you are getting maybe just 5% of the tenders. The law says every government tender should be gazetted. So your friend should be the government gazette, which comes out every Friday, right? Yes, you get that government gazette. That's where even if the tender is advertised in the newspaper, it has to be gazetted first. Even if it's advertised on EGP, it has to be gazetted first for it to be compliant, to follow the proper laws. So look for the gazette. We also get all these tenders and we put them on our portal. For those who have been using tender notice board, you know that we send notifications for these tenders on a daily basis. Then after that, that's the beginning of what we call a bidding period. When a tender is gazetted, the bidding period starts. What is a bidding period? This is the period from when the tender is advertised up to the closing date. So that's the time when you prepare your bid. That's the time when you ask questions. That's the time when you do site visits, if there are any site visits to be done. After a tender is closed, we enter into the evaluation period, right? So the evaluation period is the time when your bids are now received, and then they are looking at the bids to see which one is going to win the tender, which one is the most economically advantageous bid. Then after that, the notification of award is actually put out. It's gazetted as well. And after the notification of award, there is what we call a 14-day standstill period. That 14-day standstill period, you are allowed as a bidder to challenge if you are not happy with the results. Now we are talking transparency, isn't it? You are allowed as a bidder to challenge during that 14-day period. If you don't challenge, then ultimately the tender is awarded to the winning bidder. Then we enter into the contract period, and then the delivery and the payment. So this is just a skeleton of the procurement cycle, but we want to dive deep into each and every stage so that we understand, especially the bidding period stage, so that we understand what we are required to do so that we submit bids that are responsive. All right, maybe we can move to the next slide. There. Okay. All right. So earlier on I spoke about procurement methods, right? So these are the 4 procurement methods that I used, right? The RFQs, you know, it doesn't make sense for a government entity to advertise a request for a laptop. Maybe that laptop costs 600 and the advert costs 400. The administrative costs outweighs the benefit that we're going to get, or the cost of the laptop, the actual laptop. So it's not every tender that is actually advertised or gazetted. RFQs are not gazetted, but they are put on EGP, or they can be sent directly to your email. That's why it's very important for you to be registered on the EGP system. So RFQs are small procurements, and I think I've mentioned the thresholds. I said 5,000 for services. If you are into services, 5,000 is the ceiling. After 5,000, it goes for a tender. If you are into supply of goods, 10,000 is the ceiling. If you are into construction, 20,000 is the ceiling. So anything above these thresholds goes to competitive bidding. It means that it's now being opened to everyone so that people can actually participate. Even RFQs are open to everyone, but the advertising is not wide as compared to the open tenders. So under competitive bidding, we've got 2 types of tenders. We've got what we call domestic tenders, and we've got what we call international tenders. Domestic tenders, that's when only local companies are allowed to participate. This was done to actually encourage local people, citizens, to participate in government tenders. And you actually see that the bulk of tenders that are advertised are domestic tenders. Did you know that for any project, let's say it's a construction project, if it's below $4 million US, that project is reserved for local companies only. It's advertised under domestic, as a domestic tender. If it's supply of goods and it's below 300,000, that project is only for domestic companies. And if it's services and it's below 200,000, it's for local companies only. So the Act, the Public Procurement Act that we were talking about, under Section 28, subsection 2, it says domestic tenders are only for Zimbabwean companies. So there was a loophole there. A foreigner would come into Zimbabwe, or our brothers, I don't want to use that word, isn't it? Our brothers and sisters from other countries, they would come, register their company. The fact that they've registered the company in Zimbabwe, automatically it becomes a Zimbabwean company, though it's owned by foreign nationals. So there's a bill right now that has been tabled before Parliament to actually correct that part of the act, to say Zimbabwean, not only Zimbabwean companies, but companies owned by Zimbabweans. So that's the wording that they are proposing to put into the act, so that at least they will be able to lift the corporate veil and see who owns the company. If the company is owned by a Zimbabwean, then it's a domestic company, you see. But it's unfortunate that loophole has actually benefited a lot of people, especially from a certain, I will not be specific, isn't it? Yeah, you know our friends, they know that there's money in Zimbabwe. They come here, they register their companies, and it's a Zimbabwean company. They start participating in domestic tenders. So one of the changes also that will come by actually changing that act, that part of the act, is that they are also proposing that it should be specific, that preference should also be given to youth companies that are owned by young people. Already the act gives preference to companies that are owned by women. So if you've got a company and that company is owned by women you actually favored, isn't it? So companies that are owned by women, they get higher preference as compared to companies that are owned by us, right? And also, they are proposing that preference should also be given to companies that are owned by our heroes, the war vets, isn't it? They should also benefit out of it as well. Okay, so this is a domestic tender. If it's an international tender, it means that both domestic and local companies will participate. But still, I want you to know that there's no reason for us as Zimbabweans to actually not participate in tenders. There's no reason, because already the law was set in such a way that we should ultimately be the winners at the end of the process. Even if it's an international tender, let's say there are two companies that participated on a tender, an international company and a domestic or a local company. A domestic company is given 10% preference. So if the domestic company charged 110,000, right, and the international company charged 100,000, under normal circumstances, would say the international company is cheaper, isn't it? So we award to the international company. But what they do is they give 10% preference, which means that domestic company, even if it's more expensive with 10,000 more, it will be awarded the tender. Because the reasoning is they will pay taxes, they will create employment, so we should always support domestic companies. Right, so that's all to do with competitive bidding. We also have got what we call restricted bidding. So the act allows companies to approach just a few suppliers, government companies to approach just a few suppliers. It sounds unfair, I know, but there are well-stipulated reasons for a government entity to only approach just a few companies. So if they approach two or more companies without opening it up to everyone, it's called a restricted bidding method. If you are registered on EGP, if you are invited under restricted bidding, you will see the invitation in your dashboard under events management, right? So a lot of my clients, some of them didn't know that they've been invited under restricted bidding, and they didn't participate because they didn't know how to navigate the EGP system. It's unfortunate, The moment it involves two or more suppliers, then there's an element of competitiveness, and there should be fair treatment of bidders. So if you don't participate, it's up to you, right? Then we have got also what we call a direct procurement. Direct procurement, this is when they only approach you as a supplier, just one supplier. There's a story in the Bible about King Solomon when he wanted to build the temple. And the Bible says he approached King Hiram, if I'm not mistaken, and actually asked for King Hiram to provide the materials and also to provide the skill for them to build the temple. That one is a classic example of a direct procurement, isn't it? So procurement didn't start right now. It started way, way, way back. Everything that we do here, the Bible has mentioned it before, right? So direct procurement, they only approach one. Why do they approach one or two companies when we are saying it's the national cake and everyone should benefit? Why do they do that? There are scenarios where there will be cases of emergence. It doesn't make sense to go through competitive bidding, because competitive bidding by nature takes time, because you are inviting a lot of companies. So in cases of emergence, they just use direct or restricted, right? Then if the market was not responsive, let's say they've advertised a tender, and you guys do not respond to that tender. Only one person responded to that tender, and that person is responsive both commercially and technically, and the price meets our expected budget. They will cancel that tender and actually do it as a direct procurement. What it means is they are now going direct to that supplier. So each and every time when you don't participate on a tender that is related to your business, you are giving the government information to say there are no other people who do these things. So don't bother advertising. Next time, just use direct method. So you should always participate in tenders, so that at least the tenders continue to be flighted and they know that there are other suppliers, right? There are some cases for compatibility reasons. They can do a direct procurement for compatibility reasons. Let's say they buy a certain product from you, and now they want that product to be serviced. I'll give an example of motor vehicles, right? If they buy motor vehicles from a company like Zimoco, they can't advertise for the service of that motor vehicle, because if that motor vehicle is serviced by another company, it will affect the warranty period. So they go back to the authorized dealer. Right. So in that case, they use direct or restricted bidding method. All right. So this is to do with procurement methods. It's good for us to understand these procurement methods. Why? And their thresholds. Why is it important? Now that you know that there are thresholds involved in request for quotations, if you receive an email from a government institution requesting a quotation, and that request is actually, they are saying it's an RFQ, make sure that your price is within the thresholds. If it's supplier for goods, if you can go slightly below 10,000, then that will give you an added advantage. If you price above the thresholds, what you have just done is you have only participated in market research for that procuring entity. They are going to cancel that tender, that RFQ, and then re-advertise it as a competitive bidding method. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, I think I spoke about domestic preferences, isn't it? And I was actually talking about these thresholds where I was saying anything below 5 million actually is supposed to be done through a domestic tender. All right, so I think maybe we can move forward so that we can move again. We can move forward as well. Okay, thank you. Right, so remember we spoke about the bidding period earlier on, and we said this is the time from when a tender is advertised up to when a tender actually closes. Why is this important? Because there are very important events that can take place during the bidding period. And if you don't participate in those events, you might not be compliant at the end of the day. If you are into construction, or if there is a pre-bid meeting or a site visit scheduled during the bidding period, most of these pre-bid meetings are mandatory. So you should make sure that you attend the pre-bid meetings. That's why it's very important for you to see a tender advert as soon as possible, as soon as it's advertised. Because if you get a tender advert after the site visits or the pre-bid meetings, then you are no longer eligible. You have disqualified yourself before the tender actually started. So make sure that you are the first person to get the tender. Look out for site visits. Are there any site visits for this tender? Are there any pre-bid meetings for this tender? And then you make sure that you attend. There's another date which is very important, which is called the bid clarification deadline. So remember, we said the whole idea is to make sure that there is fair treatment of bidders in public procurement. So what they do, they say, during the first half of the bidding period, you as a bidder, you are allowed to ask questions. After reading the tender document, you might have some questions. You are allowed to go through to ask questions to the procuring entity. To say, we didn't understand the technical specs. What did you mean when you said you want a Core i5? You know, what did you mean when you said you want a computer with 16 gig RAM? Are we allowed, do you accept these brands or you don't accept these brands? All those questions. You ask those questions during the first half of the bidding period. After the first half of the bidding period, you are no longer allowed to ask questions. So imagine you get a tender after the first half of the bidding period and you have got questions. You've got no one to ask, actually. So you are like someone who is going to respond blindly without proper information. Right? The government has made it so easy. Right now, previously we used to ask questions through emails, right? But now, all these processes that I'm talking about are done through the EGP system. It's done online. You don't need to go anywhere. So you can actually go on EGP, click post query, and then ask a question, and the response comes on EGP as well. But when they respond to your query, they don't just respond to you. They respond to everyone. Remember, we said transparency and fair treatment of what? Of bidders. Yes. So when they respond, they don't respond to just you. They respond to everyone. Just in case someone wanted to ask the same question and maybe you didn't ask, so that person can actually see the response there. All right. Then we've got what we call the tender opening ceremony. So before the introduction of the online platform, the EGP, we used to submit tenders physically. If the tender is for City of Bulawayo, you'd go with your envelopes. You know, they would require 3 copies of the tender documents and submit the tenders. But now, this is done online. So the ceremony is actually done online. It's not a Zoom ceremony or such, as such. But what happens is, once your tender closes, each and every procuring entity has got what we call a tender opening committee. So what does the tender opening committee do? The tender opening committee is responsible for making sure that all the tenders have been opened online, all the documents have been downloaded, and they are now being handed over to the evaluation committee. So that during this process, there's no company that is left out. Right? So the system is made in such a way that the tender will not open if any one of the tender opening committee members is not online. All the 4 members should be online. Then they open at the same time. Right? And besides the tender opening, when you submit your tender on EGP, there is what we call encryption. Those who are into IT, I think they understand what encryption is all about. So you encrypt your bid such that no one sees your bid. It only decrypts during the tender opening ceremony. Why am I saying this? Remember, we said most people have got misconceptions about the government tenders, right? So tell me how you are going to influence every member of the tender opening ceremony, of the tender opening committee, right? Tell me how a buyer is going to tell you that bidder so has already submitted a quotation which is valued at this much, so your price should be this much. Tell me how that is going to be done when your bid is encrypted. You see, it's a very transparent process. If in any way there is someone who tries to influence this process, yes, they might succeed in doing so, but there will always be a footprint, an audit trail. You know, so the system will always be shouting to say something fishy was done here, right? So after the tender has been opened, your tenders are then handed over to what we call an evaluation committee. Previously, we used to call them adjudication committees. I was a member of the adjudication committee when I was with ZESA for 6 years. So we used to call them adjudication committees, but now they are called evaluation committees. These evaluation committees, they've got at least 5 people in that committee. That's the committee that evaluates your bid. They've got at least 5 people. And amongst those people that are part of the evaluation committee, there is also what we call the PMU, Procurement Management Unit. Those are the procurement guys, us, isn't it? So you guys will be saying, okay, my uncle is a procurement manager at so-and-so company, so I'm going to win this tender. But do you know that your uncle, who is part of the PMU, does not have any voting power in the evaluation committee? So the procurement guys do not have a say. They do not have any voting power in selecting a winning bidder. This was done to try and reduce the power that the procurement guys have, so that they don't influence the what? The system. So in this committee, there will be maybe people from the finance guys, the user department, which are the technical guys, the HR, the senior management. They are part of the evaluation committee. And they evaluate a tender. After evaluation, if a tender is above certain thresholds, sometimes it has to go to SPOC, what we call Special Procurement Oversight Committee. So if you're going to influence the outcome of a tender, you have to start by influencing the bid opening committee, you influence the evaluation committee, you influence SPOC committee. And do you know the members of the SPOC committee? The chairperson of the SPOC committee is the Attorney General, so you have to influence him as well. The other members are the Accountant General. The Auditor General was part of the SPOC committee, but is no longer part of the SPOC committee because the argument was she cannot be part of a process that she's going to audit at the end of the day. So the Auditor General, PRAS CEO, and Director of Public Works, they are all part of the SPOC committee. So you have to influence all those people. So if we are talking of tenders, it's a technical process. If you do your bid well and you prepare your bid well, definitely you win the tender. And if your price is competitive, definitely you win the tender. One other thing is, before the closing date, in the standard bidding document or the tender document that you are given to prepare a bid, there's a section which we call the evaluation criteria, right? So the evaluation criteria is set way before the tender is advertised. So this means that they will say that for administrative purposes, we are going to look at 1, the tax clearance, 2, NASA, we're going to look at common registration documents, then the technical specs, the minimum acceptable technical specs are so and so. The Act does not allow the evaluation committee to change the evaluation criteria after the tender is closed. If there is any change on the evaluation criteria, it should be done during the bidding period before the tender closes. It's done through what we call an addendum. So even if they don't like you, right, they cannot set new evaluation criteria. They have to use those same evaluation criteria that they put when they advertise the tender. Right. So you see, it's a very straightforward game, isn't it? All right, so maybe we can move to the next slide. Okay, we spoke about legal requirements earlier on. Maybe through you, Doc, I can even share the presentation after, so that people can actually go through it as well. Okay, so let's move to the next slide as well. Okay, to the next one. I think most of the things we spoke about. Okay. I'm always referring to the standard bidding document, right? That's the language that I'm using. When I'm saying a standard bidding document, I'm referring to a tender document, what we call a tender document. This is the document that you get when a tender has been advertised, and it has got all the instructions for you to be able to respond. Right. Let me give you a short history of these standard bidding documents. The standard bidding documents were introduced in 2018. We used to use what we call tender documents, and tender documents would differ from one company to the other. We used to have different tender documents. If you go to ZESA, you get a tender document that is different from the one from NASA and so on. So you had to go through all these documents, study them, understand them before you respond. This made it very difficult for bidders to respond. You know, because you had to be a student all the time. You get a new tender document. So to try and standardize the process, the government of Zimbabwe introduced what we call standard bidding documents. These documents are standard templates for all tenders that are done here in Zimbabwe. So they are standard bidding documents for supply of goods. They are standard bidding documents for works, for construction. They are standard bidding documents for consultants. So once you master a standard bidding document, you are ready and you can actually respond to any government tender. And the good part about standard bidding documents is we came up with these reforms through the help of the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. So these standard bidding documents are also used by some big NGOs as well. So once you master the standard bidding documents, if you come across them through NGO tenders, you can actually respond. So the standard bidding document has got 3 parts. There is the first part, which is called the bidding procedure. Right? This part tells you what is required. This part generally talks about Section 28 that we've been talking about, right? We spoke about Section 28, where we said common registration documents, tax clearance, and so on. All the documents that are required for you to participate on a tender, you find them under Part 1. Maybe we can move to the next slide so that people can see. Okay. Okay. Then we also have got Part 2, right? Part 2, under Part 2, you find what we call statement of requirement, delivery schedules, and technical compliance sheet. Right. So Part 1 is giving you requirements for you to be eligible to participate. It's telling you what constitutes a responsive bid. It's telling you the documents that you need to put so that you can be able to respond. Part 2 is now telling you the scope of the work. Statement of requirements. What do we want to buy? If we want to buy computers, the computers will be listed under Part 2. And when they are listed under Part 2, the technical specs will be listed also under Part 2 technical compliance sheet. That's where you get the technical specs, right? Then delivery schedule. How long are you going to take to be able to deliver the products or the services? Right. That part is very important, the delivery schedule, because it's always part of the evaluation criteria as well. So you don't just put a delivery time that you think is fit. When you're doing tenders, unfortunately, it's not about what you think is correct, but it's about what they want. So if you go through a tender document, you see the minimum acceptable or the maximum acceptable delivery time. That's the one that you should put under delivery schedule. If they say they want you to deliver within 14 days, if you put 7, you are compliant. If you put 13, you are compliant. If you put 15, you are automatically disqualified. So it's a matter of understanding what is in the standard bidding document, what do they require? And do I meet that criteria before I actually respond to a tender? Because there are costs, to be honest, there are costs involved in bidding. So you don't want to bid on a tender that you know you'll be automatically disqualified. There are no, I'm looking for a suitable word. If you're not compliant, you're not compliant. Even if you are the sole bidder for that tender. They would rather cancel and re-advertise. So make sure that when you respond to a tender, you've got all the documents that are required. Because you don't want to lose money. Remember, when you do some tenders, there are some monies that are paid sometimes. Bid security, right? Spoke fees. So you don't want to pay your bid security, knowing that you do not have a valid tax clearance. You're just wasting your money there, because obviously you're not going to be awarded that tender. All right. So make sure that everything is in order. Delivery period, then also technical compliance. Under technical compliance, the procuring entity gives you what we call minimum acceptable technical specs. If they say we want a Core i5 laptop, you can offer a better one, that's fine, but it doesn't give you an added advantage over others who have quoted the minimum acceptable specs. So there is a tendency by bidders to try and put a product that has got higher specs, and at the end of the day, they lose a tender because they were not competitive. Because obviously, the general rule is higher specs come with a higher price. So make sure that you use the minimum acceptable technical compliance, specs. And the good part about public procurement is that the procuring entities are not allowed to mention a brand in their technical specs. They are not allowed to mention a brand. Because remember, we said this is the national cake, right? And there should be fair treatment of bidders. So if I say I want an HP laptop, what about those dealers who are not HP dealers? What about dealers who use, what are the other brands? Lenovo, isn't it? So you are not allowed to mention a specific brand. There's a case that actually happened. I think it went through the courts, so I'm free to talk about it. Remember, there was a case about laptops at the Parliament of Zimbabwe. Do you remember that case? Yes. There was a case about laptops at the Parliament of Zimbabwe which were allegedly overpriced, right? One of the main issues that was raised concerning that case was the issue of a brand. The Parliament of Zimbabwe actually mentioned a brand in the standard bidding document, which is against the public procurement law. You know, they mentioned HP as a brand. You only mention brands when you are buying a good that is going to benefit an employee as part of the employment agreement benefits. For example, you want to buy a motor vehicle for your manager and it's part of the contract of employment that the manager should get a vehicle of his or her choice. In that case, if the manager says, I want a Mercedes-Benz or I want a GD6, then that's where you see brands being mentioned in standard bidding documents. Why am I saying this? Because most bidders do not have all this information. Sometimes they end up participating in tenders that will eventually be cancelled and losing resources at the end of the day. So brands are not allowed to be mentioned, but you are allowed to mention a brand when you are responding. Definitely you should mention the product that you are actually giving. All right, so maybe we can move to the next slide. All right, so in the standard bidding document, there are different forms there, right? We have got what we call a bid submission sheet. I'll talk about each and every form, and if possible, I think we have to beam the forms. I think on the next slide, the forms are there. Maybe we can just move. Okay, so that's the standard bidding document. The standard bidding document is usually the first page of your bid. When we're submitting tenders manually, that would be the first page of your bid. This document is very important. No matter how good your proposal is, if you fail to complete the standard bidding document, then you are not going to be awarded that tender. How do you then complete the standard bidding document? Obviously, you have to complete the procurement reference number, you have to complete all the information that is required. But I want to take I want to emphasize more on what we call a bid validity, right? On the standard bidding document, there is a point where they talk about a bid validity. It's very easy, it's very difficult sometimes it's very easy to pass through the bid validity without completing it. There's a part where they talk about bid validity. What is bid validity? Bid validity is, when we are selling, when we're doing cash sales at our shops, we usually say this quotation or this invoice is valid, or this quotation is valid for 24 hours, isn't it? That's what we write on our invoices. We are referring to the bid validity. When we are doing tenders, we don't use that language. We use bid validity. Bid validity is, we are saying we are going to lock our price, terms and conditions for this number of days after the closing date. That's bid validity. So in this case, you don't put a bid validity that you think is right. You get the bid validity from the standard bidding document. Right? So the answers are already given when you're doing tenders. The answers are there in the standard bidding document. There's no need for you to be worried about the answers. The answers are actually there. So they give you the minimum acceptable bid validity. They are saying you should lock your tender, for example, for 60 days after the tender is actually closed. So if they say the minimum acceptable bid validity is 60 days, if you put 70 days, it's fine. But I guess most of us would not want to lock it for so long, isn't it? Yes, because of the environment that we are in. So you have to put the exact bid validity. If you don't complete one of the requirements or the fields on the bid submission sheet, no matter how good your proposal is, you will be disqualified. Right? Let's go to the next form. We've got what we call a bid securing declaration. Right. A bid securing declaration is a form that you complete to demonstrate that you are committed to the procurement process. So remember, we said there is bid security that is paid, right, when you're doing tenders. Not all tenders require bid security. Some tenders do not require a bid security. What is a bid security? A bid security, this is money that is paid to a third party. So the third party will hold those funds for a certain period up until the valuation is done. This was done to reduce what we call frivolous bids. Frivolous bids are bids where someone bids and the person is awarded a tender and then he says, I cannot participate, the price is too low, I undercharged. Or for whatever reason, you failed to sign the contract. You have wasted the PMU's time, you have wasted the procuring entity's time. So to avoid that, you need to declare that you are committed to the process. How do you declare that you are committed to the process? You pay a bid security fee. So the Act actually says, there's a statutory instrument 5 of 2018. It says bid security can range from 0 to 5% of the estimated procurement value. So if we are doing a tender of 100,000, we can charge a bid security from 0 to 5%, right? If we select 0, it means that the bidder is not going to pay anything. You guys are not going to pay anything for that tender. But still, we need your commitment. So how do we get that commitment? You sign a bid securing declaration. This is an affidavit, and most people just sign this document. They don't know what they are actually declaring when they sign the document. When you sign this document, you are saying, as long as you award me this tender during the period when my bid is valid, I'll carry out the works, or I'll supply the goods. So what happens if you are awarded a tender and then you reject to sign a contract? The procuring entity can actually sue you based on that document. They can debar you. You can be banned from participating in any government tender. And if you think that you can register another company, they can debar you and the directors. So as long as your name is part of that company will not be able to participate. So when you're signing that bid submission sheet, you are actually saying, I'm going to sign. I'm going to sign the contract when I'm awarded, and I'm going to supply. But there is a twist on this issue. If the bid validity is lapsed, you have got a legal right to reject a project if it's no longer favorable. So let's say you have been awarded a tender, and they awarded you a tender after the bid validity, after maybe, for example, the 60 days bid validity. In that case, you can actually say, I'm not interested, and nothing happens. So make sure that you sign the bid securing declaration if it's there. Then coming to the bid security, how do you get a bid security? Remember, I said this is money that is paid to a third party. A bid security can be done in many forms. We have got what we call a bank guarantee, right? A bank guarantee, this is where you approach your banks, and then you tell them that I want to participate on a certain tender. They are requiring a bid security of maybe 5,000. The bank will write a bid security for you, of course, at a cost, right? Some banks might say, give us the money, the 5,000, we lock it into your account, then we unlock it after the tender process is done. But obviously, for most of the local companies, you might not have the 5,000 USD to spare and to lock for the next 60 days, isn't it? That's working capital. You want to use that money. So we also have got a partnership with a number of banks. We've got a partnership with AFC, NMB, NBS, Bank ABC, and Medbank, where we said, you know what, for our clients, do not require hasty fees for them to actually have a bank guarantee. So you just pay a small premium. The premiums range from 2.8 to 3.5% of the bank guarantee of the bid security that is required. So if it's 5,000, you only pay $160, then you get your bank guarantee for 5,000. Or you can actually choose to pay the bid security to PRAS, because PRAS is allowed to hold these bid securities. So on EGP, there's an option for you to actually pay. If they want a bid security of 5,000, you pay the 5,000, and you also pay what we call bid establishment fee, right? Because obviously, PRAS is not going to keep your money for free, isn't it? They also want a certain administrative fee to be paid for you to be able to, for them to be able to keep the bid security, right? Okay, maybe we can move to the next one. Okay, the statement of requirement, this is the other form. I think I mentioned it earlier on when I was talking about part 2. And I said part 2 is where you get the statement of requirement. This is where the goods that are being bought or the services required are listed. Now that we are doing these processes online on EGP, most tenders do not require you to complete these forms, this specific form, but the bid submission sheet you should complete, or the bid securing declaration. But the statement of requirement, usually you get that form, those forms embedded in the EGP. It's just a matter of you completing the process on EGP. It's actually embedded as an Excel, so you just complete the process. There's a part on EGP where they talk about the price bid form. You just put your unity price, and the system calculates the total price on its own. All right, I think I've spoken for so long. Before I move on, I don't know if they can ask some questions, just in case they might be having some questions before we move on. All right, if there are some questions, if you guys have got some questions before we move on, you are free to ask so that at least we make it more interactive, isn't it? All right. I think there's a hand there.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask questions. There's a part where you're talking about the standard bidding procedure being in 3 parts. And then you said we are required to perhaps mention the name of the brand that we want to supply. Are you allowed to mention options? Suppose I say HP, and then I put the amount, and then I say Lenovo, and then I put maybe 3 options. Is that allowed on my part to do that? And then they decide which option they want to go with. Can I do that as a supplier?
Thank you so much. That's a very, very important question. Why? Because most bidders actually, they actually shoot themselves in the foot by taking up that route of putting options. Never put alternative bids if you are dealing with government entities, and if you are not asked to do so. If they say they want HP, give them the best that you think you can offer. If HP is the best for you, that's your best offer, give them that best offer. Don't give them options. Giving the bidders, the procuring entity options actually makes things difficult for them during evaluation, because they now don't know which product to compare with the other bidders. So sometimes what I've seen happening is they actually pick the most expensive product, because to them you are not a very organized supplier to them when you put a lot of options. So they pick the most expensive product, so that they just make sure that you're not competitive financially. So make sure that you only put one bid, don't put alternative bids, unless if you are required to do so. Yeah. But there is another case where the tender might have lots and packages. It's a different case altogether. So there are tenders, there are 2 types of tenders. We've got what we call single lots tenders, and we've got what we call multiple lots tenders. If the tender has got a multiple lots, you are allowed to select one lot and leave out the other. Or you are allowed to respond to all the lots. Because what they are going to do for evaluation purposes, they are going to evaluate based on lots. But if you select one lot, make sure that you respond to every item in that lot. You cannot pick to say, for the lot A, I'm just going to respond to product 1 and 2 and leave product 3 and 4. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to ask the question.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for actually letting me know that there's 4 million waiting for me in domestic business.
Yes, yes.
The first question is, it's in relation to unsolicited bids.
Okay.
Are there instances where we can use these unsolicited bids in Zimbabwe? Number 1. And number 2, there is a bit of an issue with public-private partnership projects where they say there's a PRAS route, there's a ZEDA route. So I wanted to also ask that, do the unsolicited bids apply to those public-private partnership projects? Maybe terms and all that.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the bulk of the processes that we are talking about right now are those for open tenders, right? And from my understanding, the public-private partnerships, most of them do not usually go through open tenders. You know, just a few might go through open tenders. In most cases, it's the private companies approaching the government to say, we see that there is a need in this area. Can we work together? I'll give you an example. I think we did it was a small project, small tender with TEL1, right? Currently, if you go even on tender notice board, if you actually see that you can actually buy TEL1 products through our portal, it's a private-public partnership because TEL1 on its own is a public company. So a lot of tenders, a lot of private public tenders do not go through open tendering. It's actually the private company that initiates the process. Only in a few cases, like in this case of TEL1, they had after we approached them, they now had to advertise a tender for distributorship. Then other companies actually came on board, and I think about 3 companies were awarded the tender, including tender notice board as well. I hope I have answered your question there. All right.
Hello, morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to refer back to what the lady asked in terms of laptops. So we have 3 brands, for example, Lenovo, Dell, HP. So we're talking of a Core i5. A Lenovo Core i5 would cost $400. A Dell Core i5 would cost $500. And an HP Core i5 would cost $600. So you said on the tenders, they cannot mention a brand. So you've got guys or a company which prefers HPs. However, because you are responding to a Core i5 laptops, you put a Lenovo, which is cheaper. But supposedly this company wants HP and you don't know. So how do you handle that in terms of then them picking up the highest, because at the end of the day, there's a disclaimer to say we are not bound to pick the cheapest. So how do you differentiate on that particular tender, how they end up picking up the most expensive or the cheapest?
All right, thank you so much for that question. It's a very important question. Okay, so let's say as a procuring entity, you want a specific brand for a specific reason. What they do is they can actually seek authorization from the authority, which is PRAS, citing reasons to say we want an HP because of 1, 2, 3. In that case, you see a brand being mentioned in the standard bidding document. But it's very difficult to get that authorization. So let's say they are silent now, and maybe from what they do, what I've seen that they do, I'll just give an example of motor vehicles. They'll say we want a double cab, right? And then we want engine capacity 2 liter, type of fuel, diesel. If you go through the specs, for those who are into motor vehicle supply, you know that they are actually talking of a certain brand, because there are some other specs that you don't find in other brands. So they are not mentioning a brand, but the specs are pointing towards a specific brand. So this is what happens in most cases. Okay, the follow-up question.
Sorry, I would like to be specific to the issue.
Yes.
In particular laptops. So a Core i5, you get it at 16, 2.1, 512 SSD. And this will apply to all the brands. There is no indication because they are looking, does it have a 15-inch screen? It does have, everyone has the same. Does it have a DVD-ROM? Everything has it. So it's across the board. But to them, they've got a brand that they want. But according to you, they are not allowed to specify. So I think that's what she meant when then she suggested, can I put all the 3 so that they can choose what they want? Because already they know, but we don't know that they want. Because in terms of specifications, they are the same across the brand, across the board. So that's exactly what I feel she wanted to ask. maybe didn't come out as much.
Okay, thank you so much for that follow-up question. And you know what? I still come back to the same issue to say, don't submit alternative bids, right? If a brand is not mentioned, which means the procuring entity has done it well, it's compliant, right? The procuring entity, even if they know that they want an HP, if a Lenovo meets technical specifications and it's affordable and the price is competitive, they will be forced to award the one who is offering a Lenovo. Remember, we said procuring entities cannot change evaluation criteria or cannot put evaluation criteria that are silent or ambiguous. Specifications have to be straightforward. So if you put multiple brands, thinking that you're doing a favor to them because you know that they want an HP, someone will put a Dell and a Lenovo and the price will be competitive and that person will be awarded. Whether the procuring entity wants it or not, according to the process, that is the winning bidder. So if they want to avoid that, it's good for them to actually seek authorization. So as long as the brand is not mentioned, don't worry about it. Put your best brand which makes you competitive financially. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. Okay. I just have two. The first one, when you want to tender for government opportunities, do they look at, in terms of the company, do they look at references like years of experience? Do you have a track record? Whom have you served before? Things like that. And when it comes to my entity giving it a go on the bids, do they look at, is it a PTY or it's sole owned? And how much chance does a sole owned entity like stand when compared to a PTY where there are two or more directors? Just to know if you are new in the space, how much chance do you stand if you want to also give it a go on the government space? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So, like I said earlier on, there is space and for everyone to participate in government tenders. If you are registering your company, there are different types of companies, like you mentioned. We also have got private limited companies, the most commonly used type of company. We have got PBCs and so on. What I would advise you, if you intend to participate on big government projects, it's good for you to register your company as a private limited company or a public limited company if it's going to be a big corporation. Why? Because there is less risk in dealing with a private limited company as compared to a PBC. Most PBCs, they are considered to be partnerships, isn't it? Yes. And also, it protects you as well as a bidder to have a private limited company because, if I'm not mistaken, there is a limitation to how you can be affected negatively if your company doesn't perform well at personal level. So it's good for you to have a private limited company. That's the most commonly used. When we are talking of big projects like road projects, it's very, very rare to find a PBC being awarded such a project because PBCs are generally considered to be small companies. And coming to the question where you said you are just starting. If you are just starting, of course, tenders require some additional documents like references. So maybe you have just registered your company and you do not have any references. You start with RIFQs. Most RIFQs do not require you to have references. Most RIFQs are not strict on NASA compliance, but of course, for all tenders, you have to be tax compliant and you have to be properly registered. So you start with RIFQs. And the good part about RIFQs, they give you a chance to participate at the end of the day, getting those references that you need for the big projects. So when we are talking of dealing with the government, let's not start, if you are starting, don't start with big tenders. Start with RIFQs. After all, RIFQs are good for your working capital as well. Because the bidding period for an RIFQ is very, very, very short. 3 days, they advertise a tender. 3 days, it's closed. Within a day, they've awarded. you are now supplying and they quickly pay you. So you can actually do a lot of RFQs within 1 month. But if you're going to do a tender, you have to be someone who is patient. Why? Because domestic tenders, generally, they are flighted for at least 20 to 21 days. International tenders are flighted for 40 days. So you have to be someone who is looking into the future. Maybe you are expecting to get your money in the next 3 or 4 months. But with RFQs, you know within a week, your money, all right. Okay, maybe that last question, then we continue, then we then give an opportunity at the end of the presentation.
Good day, Mr. Manyere.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is around risk management when you are participating specifically in a government tender. Are there tenders that you might say there are certain types that are red flags, number one? Okay. And number two, how do you cushion yourself against risks, for example, fiscal risks like exchange rates, where our local currency is fluid, there's so much movement, and then you are then paid after a certain time period, and you've already lost value from the movement of exchange rates. So the summary would be, are there any tenders that you'd say there are certain types that are red flags that you'd recommend smaller boys not to participate? By smaller boys, I mean someone who won't have enough capital to cushion any risk. And number two, just how do you manage and navigate that environment? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that question. I think I will have to be wise by answering that one. It's a difficult one. I don't want to be misquoted. So remember earlier on I spoke about annual procurement plans. What the government of Zimbabwe has done is they have forced every procuring entity to come up with an annual procurement plan before they start buying. This was meant to make sure that whatever they want to buy, they've got a budget for those products or for those services. Because previously we would do tenders, RFQs, only to cancel, only to fail to pay after people have actually submitted. So to try and keep that, they introduced annual procurement plans. And annual procurement plans are also derived from the budget. So that's the other way. So to minimize risk, you should also go through the annual procurement plan and see where the money is coming from. In the annual procurement plan, there's a section where they tell you that they want to buy laptops or they want to buy motor vehicles. The source of funds is so and so. They tell you where the money is coming from. So if the money is coming from their own internal generation, then you are rest assured that the money might be paid quickly as compared to money that is coming from where everyone is looking up to. I think I've answered. All right. So source of funds. Make sure that you actually look at the source of funds. Where is the money coming from? If the money, and also the type of procuring entity to deal with. If you are starting, try as much as possible to deal with parastatals for the obvious reason, which is they generate their own income. So try as much as possible to deal with parastatals if you are starting. When the resources now allow, then you can deal with other government agents as well. All right. Okay, so yeah, I think we've had some questions. Let's continue so that we can finish 5 minutes. Okay, that's fine. So, right, maybe we can move to the next slide. We spoke about, okay, so in a few minutes, I also want to talk about what we call framework agreements in public procurement. So previously, before 2018, we used to have to see a lot of government entities advertising supplier registrations in the newspapers at the beginning of the year. But now it's no longer being done. Why? Because they are saying everyone who is registered under PRAS is an eligible supplier. So they are now doing what we call framework agreements. for procurements that are repetitive. Maybe we know that we would require stationery, and this is the amount of stationery that we require. If that's the amount of stationery that we require for the year, we can actually say, let's do a framework agreement. It's an agreement. It's like an advanced supplier registration. It's an agreement between the procuring entity and one or two suppliers. Framework agreements can range from 1 to 3 years. That's why they are very important. If you didn't participate on a framework agreement, let's say with ZESA for stationery, it means for the next 3 years, you won't be able to supply stationery to ZESA. So framework agreements are very, very important, and you should also participate in framework agreements. So under framework agreements, we've got a form or a document which is called the letter of bid, right? The letter of bid, under framework agreement, you will not see a bid submission sheet form that we were talking about. You only see a letter of bid, right? You see a letter of bid, a bidder's information form, joint venture information form if you're going to participate as a joint venture. So the letter of bid is actually straightforward. The terms are well stipulated in the letter of bid. You should go through the terms. What you just need to do is to sign if you agree with the terms. So framework agreements can be either single supplier framework agreements or multi-supplier framework agreements. Single supplier framework agreements are where only one supplier is going to be awarded the framework agreement. So it means for the next 3 years, we're going to be dealing with one supplier. But most procuring entities, they prefer multi-supplier framework agreements for obvious reasons. You know, if there's only one supplier and there's no competition, that supplier might end up increasing the prices, you know, so that he benefits because there's no competition. So to make sure that there is competition, they do what we call multi-supplier framework agreements. So under multi-supplier framework agreement, you participate on a tender, you sign a framework agreement. When they want to buy, they just call those companies that are under the framework agreement. And then you submit your quotations, then they evaluate. So that's a framework agreement. And in closing, I would also want to talk about challenging procurement proceedings, right? Remember, we said transparency, honesty, and fair treatment of bidders. You are allowed to challenge procurement proceedings at any point of the procurement process, especially after the notification of award has been put in place, right? Remember, we said after they advertise the winning bidder, we have got 14 days to challenge. So what you do is you write to the procuring entity to say, I'm not happy with the results because I thought I was the one who was going to win because of so and so reasons, isn't it? Then after that, the procuring entity will actually put the notification of award at hold. And then they go through the process of trying to assess to see whether they were wrong in the award. If they feel that they were correct, they will continue with the process, but you can take up your issue to PRAS. Then PRAS will do the same process. If PRAS feels that the procuring entity was correct, then the notification of award will be reinstated. And if you still want to challenge, you can take up your issue to the administrative court or to any other courts. Most people will actually say, do you win if you challenge? Most people, that's the question that most people have, to say, do you win if you challenge? Of course, it's a case-by-case scenario, but most people who challenge will be having facts for that challenge, because remember, you also pay a fee if you want to challenge, so that they actually avoid unnecessary challenges. So you also pay a fee, but most people have won the challenges. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that if you win a challenge, you are the one who is going to be awarded the tender. It means that we are going back to the drawing board, isn't it? We are going back to the drawing board. If we redo the process the correct way, and it points you as the winning bidder, then you are the winning bidder. There are a lot of cases where challenges have been made, and companies have actually won their challenges. I think we've got a case that we all know about, ZPC and Intratech. Do you know that case? We don't know that case. Oh, okay. So there's a case of ZPC and Intratech where they were awarded a project Gwanda Solar Project. Yes. Yes. I think most people know the owner more than the company, isn't it? All right. So they were awarded that tender, but it was later cancelled for different reasons. Then they challenged the cancellation, and eventually they won. And the court said, you know what, it's either you reinstate the contract or you pay 25 million to the company in damages. And what I've seen over the years is procuring entities, they respect companies that challenge as compared to companies that accept everything, every result that comes out. So if you challenge, then I remember some time when I was with ZESA, a certain company challenged, so we re-advertised the tender. When we were adjudicating, we had to make sure that we go through the bid twice for that company which previously challenged, because we didn't want another challenge, you know. So they actually respect companies that challenge. And you will not, it doesn't mean that you lose potential income in the near future if you challenge. That's not the case. Because remember, we said it's a technical process, and obviously the procuring entity has to follow the evaluation criteria that they have set. So the challenge will not affect your future perspectives. So I will not take much time. Okay, that's fine. I will not take much time. Let me just wind up. Maybe the minutes that are remaining, we can just 10. Okay, that's fine. So maybe let me just take one or two questions. Okay, I think there's a burning question here.
Good afternoon, sir. And thank you for the opportunity. So I wanted to ask, if I register my company, mainly I want to participate in tenders. Then for the categories, construction, hardware, is it possible for me to bid for construction, bid for then I source from other companies, maybe a construction company that I know and also it at that job, but indeed in with my company.
Thank you so much for that question. That's a very important question. That's the ideal situation for the Zimbabwean economy, what you've described. If you limit yourself to one industry in Zimbabwe, things might change at any time, and you are not in a very good position. So if you actually check on EGP, you are allowed to register as many categories as you want, you know, and you can actually participate. Most companies that win tenders do not have the resources or the expertise. That's an honest assessment, right? So in general, the system of tendering is not meant to really reward skill. It's meant to reward those who want to be compliant and those who want to participate. That's an honest assessment, right? So if you can do the tenders for construction and you know someone who does construction, he helps you to come up with a good proposal, go for it, submit. Your experience is that person's experience. You know, there are a lot of very good guys who are into construction, but they don't have paperwork. They don't know how to respond to tenders. You know that this person is a very good engineer. This person is a very good bricklayer. Go for the contract, subcontract that person. It's allowed to subcontract. There's a document which is called the General Conditions of Contract. And that document it talks about contract management in public procurement. It allows you to subcontract, but the responsibility still is with you as the main contractor. So if you know where to source the goods, go for the tender. If they require experience, take the CVs of the relevant people and put them in the bid, and you participate for that tender. Okay. All right, I think one more question.
Thank you for the presentation. Maybe just a follow-up question to what she said. On the EGP system, there's a plethora of categories. So you said maybe if you pick a lot, you should maybe pick product A, product B, product C, product D. You should like pick the whole lot. So my question is, if we are to pick the whole lot, we should subscribe to the different categories, like we should apply for the different categories. But isn't that a financial burden maybe to the company when you're applying for that tender?
Okay. I'm sure you're referring to the fees that you have to pay for you to get that category on EGP, isn't it? Yes. Of course, you don't they don't just give you those categories. You have to pay, and currently it's 120 USD per category. But now we are saying if you have got the money and you want to participate in a number of categories, you are not. There's no law to stop you from actually applying for those categories. You can apply for those categories. I know of a company in Blawayo that applied for 33 categories. I don't know if they did that this year, but they applied for 33 categories. One company. So what that company does is it's just looking for tenders. They've got people who prepare these tenders and then they participate. So if you've got the resources, there are a lot of categories on EGP. I think there are about 151 categories. And the other issue is some categories are interlinked. For example, you are into solar installation. There's a category for solar and accessories. But there's also a category for electrical installations. There's a category for electrical products. These are three categories that are different. So you find out that maybe a certain procuring entity might say, we want people who are registered under electrical products. So by virtue of that requirement, even if you had a solar and accessories category, you might be forced to apply for that other category. And the good part is the application does not take time, it's instant. If you see a tender and you don't have a category, you can just apply for that category. Within 24 hours, you are ready to participate. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. I think it's all right. I think we're done. Thank you.
Let's have another hand for Mr. Manyere for a powerful presentation. So what I figured out is the difference between those who are winning tenders and those who are not winning tenders is participation and willingness to compliance. So you can turn to your neighbor and tell them, please comply if you want to participate for tenders. So at this moment in time, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce a man who needs no introduction. A man who I'm about to introduce is Apostle Dr. S.M. Chirisa, who is a dynamic thought leader whose influence spans through health, business, family, and personal development. He is a top psychiatrist and a medical doctor, and he has become a trusted voice on mental wellness and human potential. He is a seasoned entrepreneur, a business strategist with leadership experience across blue chip companies, government entities, and he has served as a director, a general manager, a chairman of the board, a national treasurer, and a secretary general, showcasing his versatility and excellence in governance. He is also married to advocate Pastor D. Chirisa, and together they have 4 beautiful children. Apostle Dr. S.M. Chirisa is also the founder and senior pastor of Wisdom City Ministries International, where he is passionately raising kingdom-minded millionaires and leaders. At this moment in time, with a standing ovation, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Apostle Dr. S.M. Chirisa.
Hallelujah. All right, you can take your seats. Just please show by raising your hands. Did you find this session useful? And who had a feeling that I not pair? Was it just me? So, because in the maybe then those because we have to finish now one. So, Mr. Noah, so what do you recommend? Do we use one company for these multiple registrations, or we use multiple companies? Or what strategy do you do? Since company one it takes money to comply. So if you've got multiple, then that multiplies that compliance cost. What do you recommend? All right. So as the senior pastor, I'm able to ask. This is,
Thank you so much, Doc, for that question. So I think the answer depends on the financial resources. It's good to use multiple companies if you can. That would be a very, very good direction to take. The only challenge now comes on the cost of compliance. I'll give you an example of one compliant organization that might give you a headache if you've got a lot of companies. NASA, you know. NASA contributions, they are quite a lot, and if you don't pay, the penalties are very high. So you have to be someone who has got the ability to make sure that you do your returns on time in terms of NASA contributions. But if you can manage it, having 2 or more companies, different companies for different categories would be an added advantage. If you can't afford it, you can start by having only one company with multiple certificates. Thank you.
all right. So I always say to people, if you do not ask questions, you will not learn. That was one of the things that we see Jesus doing at the age of 12. He was in the temple asking questions. Anybody who does not ask questions will never learn. And sometimes your answer might look, your question might look as if it's foolish, but there'll be many other foolish people with the same question. You get what I'm saying? So be bold and ask questions when that time comes. Because when you then go to see him after today, you are now going to have to pay. You get what I'm saying? This was something that was facilitated, by the Wisdom City Ministries, Marketplace Ministries. And we want to thank the team. Please, can your team come? Can you just come? Come, so that the people can see. So I'm going to give the chair to introduce their team so that we know them, all right?
Okay. Thank you very much, Apostle. So my name is Chengetai Ziwa. And with me here is Philip Jonera, and then there's Vanessa. There are also other team members who are not with us because of other commitments. Thank you.
All right. So come on, let's put our hands together for these guys. Thank you so much. They're the ones that put this together. I just talked to Chenge and said, look, let's have, because remember we've got the Dr. SM Chirisa platform. It's different. This one is for Wisdom City, and it's as you can see, the feel and the tone is different. But we really want, the most important thing that we want is we want to drive entrepreneurship. We want to drive wealth in the kingdom of God. All right, and while many Christians are expecting that money will appear under their beds and some money will appear in their pockets by some form of miracle, we have to participate in these things. Are you hearing what I'm saying? All right. So my desire after this is to see. I already know some people who are already participating. We're in this church already participating in $1 million bids with government and things like that. But what I'm expecting is for more people to do that. Be bold. It doesn't. You don't lose anything if you bid. You get what I'm saying? So, but if you do it, if you win it, it can change your life. It can change your life. And it will also change the life of Wisdom City. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Because we expect you then to bring your tithes and your offerings so that the church, that's why we are doing this. All right. We want you rich so that the kingdom of God can be rich and be resourced. Am I talking to somebody? So I just want to pray for you. Everybody just stand. Everybody just stand. But thank you once again, Noah. Thank you. So very seasoned, and what I like is that Noah is not just a theorist. He has worked in he has worked in government entities, so he knows the process. He knows the process. And when I was the director in the Ministry of Health, we used to do tenders. And then I popped out to move his mouth because I didn't even know the tendering process. He said, I'm not going to tell it. But it's not what, but they do happen. You get what I'm saying? And So everybody lift up your hand. Let me just release grace on you. Father, in the name of Jesus, so to this afternoon we release the grace. As you have given us this wisdom, as you have given us these insights, let not these insights be just for our head knowledge. But I pray in the name of Jesus that these insights are stirring the hearts and the minds of your people who are here and those who are watching us online to take action and to be bold. So I release the spirit of boldness in the name of Jesus. I release the blessing in the marketplace. I release and speak that as you apply, may God's favor be upon your bids and God's favor be upon your tenders. I decree and declare that by this time next year, we're going to have people who are in this place. We're going to give us testimonies of the goodness of God and how tenders have been paid. In the mighty name of Jesus, we bless you in Jesus' mighty name. Say, I receive it in Jesus' mighty name. Amen and amen. All right. One more thing, please do register. We've got to register. We are not going to throw the his presentation across even Wanongwa, Sipo, you get what I'm saying? Because we're thousands of people in our groups, but the people that register who were here, they're the ones who are true Cooper. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So if you don't register, you won't get that. Okay? So please register. And also it helps us so that when we are having the next, sessions and things like that, I actually think that we'll still need a follow-up. We'll talk with Chenge and say, when can we finish this and have, as we go deeper. I'm sure today, I was writing notes. It was so mind-blowing. It was very simple, but now I understand the process in my head. You understand what I'm saying? And so please do register. If you don't register, you won't get that. And you might need to go through those slides for some of the things that you need to check on. All right. Having said that, over to you, MC.
As we take our seats, let's have another hand. Let's have another. And at this moment, I'll kindly I want to excuse our guests and Apostle and Mama to the green room.